I was just 18 when it happened. It's been almost 20 years now, but I still remember that day clearly. How everything spiraled from something as normal as selling an old laptop to something that still keeps me up some nights. Back then, I lived in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with my mom and younger sister. I was fresh out of high school, working part-time at a hardware store and saving up for community college. I had an old Dell laptop, nothing fancy, but it worked. I'd gotten a newer one as a graduation gift from my aunt, so I figured I'd sell the old one and pocket some extra cash. A couple $100 would go a long way back then. I listed it on Craigslist with a simple description. Dell Inspiron, works great, $200 or best offer. I included a few photos showing the laptop open, the screen on, and a shot of the back where the serial number was visible. Within a day, I got a handful of messages. Most were lowball offers or obvious scams. But one stood out. It was from someone named Marcus. His message was polite, straightforward. He said he was interested and asked if he could come see it that afternoon. I replied with my address. Looking back, that was my first mistake. I should have suggested meeting somewhere public. But I was young, naive, and honestly didn't think twice about it. My mom was home, so I figured it would be fine. Marcus showed up around 4 p.m. in a silver sedan. He looked to be in his late 20s, average height, wearing jeans and a plain black t-shirt. Nothing about him screamed danger. He was polite, soft-spoken even. I brought him into the living room and showed him the laptop. He powered it on, clicked around for a bit, asked a few basic questions about the battery life and whether it had any issues. Everything seemed normal. After about 5 minutes, he said he'd take it. He pulled out $200 in cash, counted it out in front of me, and handed it over. I gave him the laptop and the charger. We shook hands, he thanked me, and left. That was it, or so I thought. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Hey," he said, "I think there's a problem with the laptop. The screen just went black and won't turn back on." I was confused. It had been working fine when he left. "Did you try holding down the power button?" I asked. "Yeah, nothing's happening. Look, I don't want to be a jerk about this, but I just gave you $200 for something that doesn't work. Can I bring it back and we can figure this out?" I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I also felt guilty. What if something really was wrong? What if it had malfunctioned right after he left? I didn't want to rip anyone off. "Okay," I said, "you can bring it back and we'll take a look." He said he'd be there in 20 minutes. When he showed up the second time, something felt different. He wasn't as friendly. His demeanor was colder, more impatient. He brought the laptop inside and set it on the coffee table. "See," he said, pressing the power button, "nothing." I picked it up and tried the same thing. It powered on immediately. The screen lit up and everything looked normal. "It's working fine," I said, looking up at him. He stared at me for a moment, then said, "I want my money back." "But it's working," I repeated, my voice shaking slightly. "You can see it's working." He stepped even closer, and I felt my heart start to race. "Give me my money back." My mom walked into the room at that moment, sensing the tension. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice firm. Marcus looked at her, then back at me. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Then he grabbed the laptop off the table and said, "Forget it. Keep your broken laptop." Before I could respond, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. My mom and I stood there in stunned silence. "What was that about?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "The laptop was fine. I don't understand." We went to the window and watched as he got into his car and drove off. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Over the next few days, I started noticing things. The silver sedan driving past our house multiple times a day. Sometimes it would slow down, as if the driver was looking at our house. I didn't think it was Marcus at first. I told myself I was paranoid. But then one evening, as I was coming home from work, I saw the car parked across the street. Marcus was sitting in the driver's seat, just watching. I went inside immediately and told my mom. She called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. We explained what had happened, but without any proof of harassment or threats, there wasn't much they could do. They said they'd increase patrols in the area and told us to call if he showed up again. He did show up again. Not in person, but through messages. He started emailing me, using the same email address he'd contacted me from initially. The messages were vague at first. "You owe me. This isn't over. You think you can just scam people?" I blocked the email, but then he started using different addresses. The messages got more specific, more threatening. He mentioned my sister by name. He described our house, our street, the car my mom drove. I was terrified. My mom contacted the police again, and this time they took it more seriously. They advised us to document everything, keep all the emails, avoid engaging with him, and consider getting a restraining order. We did all of that. The restraining order was granted, and for a while, the messages stopped. The car stopped showing up. I thought it was finally over. But a few months later, on a rainy October evening, I came home to find our mailbox bashed in. Lying in the grass next to it was the Dell laptop, smashed to pieces. The screen was shattered, the keyboard destroyed, and written across the top in permanent marker were the words, "You lose." We called the police. They filed a report, but we never heard from Marcus again after that. No more emails, no more drive-bys, nothing. It was like he'd vanished. But the damage was done. I stopped using Craigslist altogether. I became hyper-vigilant about who I gave my personal information to. I still get anxious when I see a silver sedan parked near my house. Looking back, I realize how lucky we were that it didn't escalate further. But it taught me a hard lesson about the dangers of inviting strangers into your life, even for something as simple as selling a laptop. You never know who's on the other end of that message. And sometimes, $200 isn't worth the risk. I thought I found the perfect apartment near campus for just $300 a month. What I discovered instead was a windowless basement room and a landlord with a carefully rehearsed lie that nearly trapped me forever. I didn't grow up with money. My dad left when I was 3, and my mom raised me and my older brother while working 2 jobs. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment most of my life, and I shared a room with my brother until he moved out. When I finally graduated high school and got into Pinefield University, just about an hour and a half from home, I knew I'd have to figure out housing on my own. Dorms were out of the question. They cost almost as much as tuition, and my financial aid only stretched so far. I tried to find roommates, but most of the listings were either already full or way out of my price range. I was working part-time at a grocery store and saving every penny I could. But by the time August rolled around, I still didn't have a place to live. That's when my mom started helping me look. She wasn't very tech-savvy, but she knew her way around Craigslist, especially the housing section. One afternoon while I was at work, she sent me a screenshot of a post. It was for a room in a house just 15 minutes from campus. The rent was $300 a month, everything included, no deposit, no credit check. The ad mentioned that the homeowner was a quiet man in his 40s who lived in the finished basement and preferred female tenants because he'd had bad experiences with male roommates in the past. It also said he rarely saw his tenants because he had his own kitchen and entrance. Something about that part felt off, but my mom was excited. "This sounds perfect for you," she said. "Clean house, low rent, and it's in a nice neighborhood." I didn't love it, but I agreed to go see it with her the next morning. We made the hour-and-a-half drive in her old SUV, and I tried to keep an open mind. The house itself was on a quiet street in a suburban neighborhood just outside the city. It was a ranch-style home with tan siding and blue shutters. Looked pretty normal. Fresh-cut lawn, wind chimes on the porch, a bird feeder in the front yard. Not the kind of place you expect something bad to happen. The man who answered the door, Tom said his name was, he looked to be in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. He was average height, average build, wore jeans and a gray t-shirt tucked into a belt that had seen better days. He smiled warmly, shook both our hands, and invited us in. "Come on in, shoes off if you don't mind. I like to keep things clean," he said. The inside of the house was neat, almost too neat. The living room looked like it had been staged, not a pillow out of place, no clutter, and no personal items anywhere. The kitchen was spotless, with polished countertops and exactly 3 bar stools. There was a faint scent of lemon cleaner and something else underneath it, something musky. My mom started chatting with him right away, asking where he worked, how long he'd lived there, what the neighbors were like. I mostly stayed quiet and looked around, scanning every corner. The more I looked, the more I noticed how empty it felt. No family photos, no signs of other people living there. Just the occasional decoration that looked like it came straight from a magazine spread. Tom didn't seem to mind me snooping. "Yeah, I keep a few things in their closets. They don't mind. We're kind of relaxed here." I could feel the hair on my neck standing up. My mom, though, was still deep in conversation with him. They were laughing about something now, some story he was telling about a past tenant who supposedly had a drinking problem and set the microwave on fire. I pulled her arm lightly. "Mom, we should get going. I have work later, remember?" Tom smiled. "No rush. But hey, your mom mentioned earlier that you'll be home alone next week while they're on vacation, right? You should stop by, maybe have dinner with me and the girls, see if everyone vibes." I forced a polite smile. "Sure, I'll text you." We left shortly after. As soon as we got in the car, I locked the doors and turned to my mom. "I'm not living there," I said. She looked surprised. "Why? He seemed nice, and it's such a good price." "Did you not notice that he lied about the room? That basement room was barely a storage closet, and it had no windows. I'd be sharing a bathroom with him, and he doesn't even have a door on his bedroom. I thought maybe he just made a mistake on the ad." "No, Mom. No one else lives there." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "There's nothing in those rooms, no signs of anyone living there. Just men's clothes in the closets. And he had no issue letting me walk into them. You think a real tenant would be okay with that?" She got quiet. "I think he's lying. I think he lives alone, and he's pretending other people live there so it looks legit. That basement room was a trap." She still seemed unsure. So when we got home, I explained everything again. I even called my stepdad into the room and laid it out clearly. The lies, the creepy vibe, the windowless basement, the toothbrushes, the drunk roommate story, the dinner invite. He listened silently, then turned to my mom. "She's right. No way in hell is she living there." She didn't argue after that. I tried to report the listing on Craigslist, but it had already been deleted. Vanished, like it was never there. For days afterward, I kept checking Craigslist under different accounts. Same city, same area. And 1 week later, I saw a new listing. Different wording, same rent, same house in the background photo. Only this time, the post mentioned a room for rent in a quiet home with female tenants, basement level preferred. I reported that one too. I never heard anything more. Never found out what his real name was. I don't even know if anyone ever moved in. But I think about that windowless room sometimes. How close I came to stepping into it alone for dinner. No windows, no closet, and no escape. And how easily I could have disappeared forever. I sold my grandfather's radio to a stranger for $300. That night, he called to tell me he had come to my apartment with a knife, planning to kill me, but my kindness saved my life. I've never been one of those people who grew up thinking everything would just fall into place. By the time I was 24, I had already moved 4 times in 5 years, worked at least 10 different jobs, and cycled through more ramen packets than I care to admit. But at that moment in my life, I was working as an event coordinator at the Silver Mesa Convention Resort in Mesa, Arizona. It was a huge hotel and convention center, a popular spot for tech expos, corporate galas, and celebrity meet and greets. I loved my job. It made me feel important, needed. There was something about the chaos of setup mornings, the excitement of last-minute changes, the satisfying click of a ballroom coming together after hours of planning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. But then the budget cuts hit. I remember the email like a punch to the stomach. My hours were being reduced from full-time to as needed, and my benefits were being suspended until further notice. No warning. That was it. It couldn't have come at a worse time. My rent was due in 2 weeks, and I barely had half of it. I'd already used up most of my savings on an emergency vet visit for my dog Cleo. She had eaten half a sock. Don't ask how that costs over $800. The side gigs weren't cutting it, and with the resort cutting hours across the board, getting a new job quickly felt like grasping at smoke. So I started selling things. First, it was clothes I hadn't worn in a year. Then an old iPad, a blender, a bookshelf. Eventually, I was down to heirlooms. Things with some sentimental value, but no real purpose sitting in a box under my bed. That's when I remembered the Emerson Model 400 tube radio. It had belonged to my grandfather, my mom's dad. A heavy, dusty, cherry wood relic from the 1940s. It didn't even work right anymore, but the casing was beautiful, and collectors still paid good money for them. I snapped a few photos, wrote a detailed description, and listed it on Craigslist for $400. I figured I'd settle for $300 if I had to. I got dozens of responses. Most were spam. A few were guys trying to haggle me down to insulting offers like $75. One guy said he'd trade it for a PlayStation 3 with 2 controllers. I didn't even respond. Then there was one message. Short, polite, direct. Hi, I'm interested in the radio. $500 cash. I can pick it up after 5 p.m. Let me know. Mark. I blinked. 500? It was more than I asked for. That never happened on Craigslist. My gut prickled a little, but desperation has a way of muting your instincts. I replied, Hi Mark, yes, $500 is perfect. I'll be home after 4:30. Let me know when you're on the way. He responded within minutes. Will do. That evening, I cleaned up my tiny apartment, placed the radio on the kitchen table, and even lit a candle to cover up the scent of Cleo's wet dog food. I was nervous, but mostly excited. I needed that money badly, and the idea of making rent without calling my mom for help was a small personal victory. At 5:11 p.m., there was a knock at the door. I peered through the peephole. The man standing outside wasn't what I expected. He looked older, maybe late 50s or even 60. Tall, heavy-set, with a thick gray beard and a leather vest over a faded flannel shirt. He looked like someone who'd ride a Harley through the desert while listening to Johnny Cash. His arms were covered in tattoos, and he held his hands awkwardly in front of him, one thumb twitching. Still, I opened the door. "You must be Mark," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He nodded, his voice gravelly. "Yeah, you got the radio?" "Yep, right over here." I stepped back to let him in. Cleo, normally a people-loving mutt, trotted up to him but stopped short, her ears pinning back. She didn't bark, didn't growl. She just stood there watching him. "Dog yours?" he asked, not looking at her. "Yeah, that's Cleo. She's friendly, usually." He didn't respond. He just walked toward the table where the radio sat. I tried to make small talk, but he didn't really engage. He opened the back panel, inspected the wiring, twisted the knobs. It was a silent 10 minutes. Then he looked at me. "Not in great shape. I'll give you 300. I blinked. "I thought you said 300, he said, firmer. "It's what it's worth. Wiring's trash." His eyes didn't leave mine. They were dark, almost black. I felt something tighten in my chest, something instinctual. I should have asked him to leave. I should have told him I'd changed my mind. But instead, I forced a smile. "Okay, 300 it is." I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I didn't want to escalate. Maybe because I felt cornered. Maybe because something about him made me feel very small in my own home. He pulled out a thick roll of bills from his back pocket and peeled off $300 notes. As he handed them to me, his fingers lingered against mine just a second too long. Then he turned, picked up the radio, and walked out without another word. I locked the door behind him and exhaled so deeply I nearly passed out. Something about that entire exchange had left me shaken. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was being paranoid. He was just weird. That didn't make him dangerous. Then my phone rang. The screen showed unknown number, local area code. I answered, thinking maybe it was my manager. "Hello?" A familiar voice responded, low and slow. "Hey there, Ella." My blood turned to ice. It was him. "You were real nice to me today. Too nice, actually." My mouth went dry. "I gotta tell you something," he said. "I wasn't going to pay you. I wasn't even coming to buy anything. I had a knife in my pocket, and I was planning to kill you." I sat up in bed, heart racing, unable to speak. "But you made me a snack. You smiled at me. You let me in like I mattered. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't." There was a long pause. "Anyway, take care of yourself, Ella. Don't trust people so easy." Click. He hung up. I stared at my phone for what felt like hours. My body trembled, my vision blurred, and Cleo started whining beside me, sensing something was wrong. I called the police. They came, took a report, and traced the number. It was from a spoofing app, untraceable. They said unless he came back or I had more details, there wasn't much they could do. I changed my locks the next day, bought a security camera, took Cleo to stay with my friend for a week, and slept with a baseball bat next to my bed. I never saw him again, but that didn't mean he wasn't out there. That moment changed me. It changed how I see people, how I see kindness, how I see Craigslist, strangers, smiles, and my own instincts. If you're reading this, I'm not telling you to live in fear, But do not ignore the voice in your gut when something feels off, because sometimes the only thing standing between you and the worst day of your life is a smile you didn't even know saved it. I was 21, broken, and desperate when I met Sierra on Craigslist. She gave me everything I needed, until the night she called the police and accused me of kidnapping and rape. The only thing that saved me was a gas station camera. I was 21 when I hit rock bottom for the first time in my life. Up until then, I'd always tried to keep things together. Graduated high school, held a job at a local auto shop, had a steady girlfriend named Elise. We were together for 8 months, and for a guy like me, quiet, kinda messed up from childhood, and always worried I'd die alone, that felt like forever. But Elise ended it. She said I was too emotionally dependent, too up and down. I didn't even argue. I just stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and started popping pills. First, it was leftover hydrocodone from a wisdom tooth surgery. Then some Xanax I bought off a kid I used to know in high school. Pretty soon, I was chewing through anything that made me feel less like a guy sitting alone in his mom's garage with nothing but a flickering bulb and a growing sense of uselessness. That's when I found her. Her name in the Craigslist ad was Sierra. She said she was looking for companionship without judgment. She was older, 34, and included a blurry photo of herself smoking a cigarette with her dog in the background. I didn't care about looks. I just wanted a warm body and maybe a little attention. Something to fill the space Elise left behind. I sent a reply late that night, buzzing off a mix of codeine and beer. I barely remember what I wrote, but she replied within an hour. "You sound sweet. Want to meet up tonight? I can drive." I should have taken the quickness of her response as a red flag. I didn't. Sierra showed up around 11 p.m. in an old silver Impala. She was bigger than I expected, but there was something maternal about her. She smiled warmly, asked if I was okay, then said, "Let's go somewhere quiet." We drove to her apartment on the east side of Maplewood, about 20 minutes away. She lived alone, had her own place, decent furniture, and even had snacks and booze ready. We didn't talk much. She just handed me a beer and asked if I wanted to relax. One thing led to another. It wasn't romantic, it was survival. I needed the comfort, and she needed something too, though I didn't understand what yet. Afterward, she asked if I wanted to stay the night. I nodded. She made me eggs in the morning and told me I could come over any time I needed a break from all the noise. That was the beginning. Weeks passed, then months. I started spending more time at Sierra's place than at home. She had everything I needed: Wi-Fi, weed, whiskey, and pills. She never said no. In return, I gave her what she wanted: attention, sex, and the illusion of something more. She knew I was broken, and she liked that. It made her feel needed. Every time I tried to talk about getting clean, she'd distract me with something, offer me a joint, pull me back into bed, or just start crying until I dropped it. "You don't need to change, baby," she'd whisper. "You just need someone who gets you." Then one night, maybe 6 months in, things shifted. We were laying on her worn-out couch, the TV droning in the background. She turned to me and said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should make this real, like get married." I blinked at her. "What?" "I've got great insurance," she said. "You could get into rehab, therapy, even detox. We'd be helping each other." I laughed it off, but she didn't. She stared at me for a long time, and I saw something in her eyes, something possessive. When I didn't give her the answer she wanted, she shut down. The next day, she barely spoke. A week later, she blew up on me when I asked if I could crash for a few days. "You just use me like everyone else," she screamed. "You're a goddamn parasite." I left, didn't call her for 2 weeks. Then came the restraining order. I was at home lying in bed when my mom came downstairs holding a letter. "It's from the county courthouse," she said, pale-faced. "Do you know a Sierra Langford?" My stomach dropped. The letter said she had filed for a temporary protective order, claiming I had been emotionally and physically abusive. She alleged that I'd threatened her, trashed her apartment, and stalked her after she cut things off. None of it was true. I felt sick, but I was also afraid. With my record, an old charge from a fight in high school, and a DUI, they might believe her. I didn't want more court dates. I didn't want to explain to a judge that I was just another strung-out idiot who made poor choices. A week after the restraining order, she called me. Blocked number, 2:42 a.m. I answered instinctively. She was crying, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Jamie," she whimpered. "I didn't mean it. I panicked. Please, I'll take it all back. I just miss you. Let me make it right. I'll bring you something, anything. Just please talk to me." I should have hung up, but the addict in me was louder than the voice of reason. She picked me up the next night. She was quiet, dead quiet, didn't make eye contact. She just handed me a drink and kept driving. When we got to her apartment, she pulled me inside, pushed me onto the couch, and went down on me without saying a word. I just laid there, unsure of everything, unsure of myself. As soon as it was over, I asked for a ride home. She nodded like it was nothing. But when I got home and sat on the porch, my phone rang again. Unknown number. "This is Officer Reynolds with the Brentwood Police Department. We need you to step outside. We're on your front porch." I froze. I ran downstairs, flushed what I had left of the pills, shoved my weed into a shoebox, and stepped outside. There were 7 cops in tactical gear waiting for me. Guns drawn, tasers aimed. One of them cracked me in the leg with a baton and slammed me onto the concrete. I was cuffed before I could even ask what was happening. They talked to my mom. She stood there crying as they brought in a canine and started tearing apart the basement. No one would tell me what I was being accused of. At the station, the detective finally sat me down. "You know a woman named Sierra Langford?" I nodded. "She says you kidnapped her at knife point, forced her into her own car, took her to her apartment, and raped her multiple times." I laughed, because it didn't feel real. "She came to pick me up," I said. "I didn't have a damn knife." "We'll see what the gas station footage says." That was the moment I remembered the stop we made at the Quick Mart. She'd gone inside alone to buy cigarettes. I'd stayed in the car. The camera showed her smiling and joking with the clerk. No signs of fear, nothing that looked like someone being kidnapped. Still, they took my clothes, swabbed me, and made me sit in a holding cell wearing paper scrubs. I spent the night in jail. Charges were eventually dropped, but not right away. It took weeks. Her story unraveled under pressure. Too many holes, too many inconsistencies. The footage saved me. Otherwise, I'd be a registered sex offender today for something I didn't do. But the damage didn't end there. She started calling again, crying, begging, screaming. She'd switch between telling me she loved me and threatening to ruin my life again if I didn't come back. I stopped answering, but she didn't stop calling. I saw her car parked near the house a few times, even though she lived 30 miles away. I reported it. Cops shrugged it off. She's not violating anything unless she talks to you or comes on the property, they said. I didn't want to go through more paperwork or hearings. I just wanted to disappear. It's been 4 years now. Every once in a while, I'll get a blocked call at 3 a.m. If I answer, there's just breathing or crying or silence. She's messaged girls I've dated since. Found them on Facebook, told them I raped her, that I'm dangerous, that I belong in prison. Some believed her, others didn't. I've been clean for 2 years now. Got a steady job at a mechanic shop in Colombia. I moved out of my mom's place. Got my own 1-bedroom apartment with blackout curtains and locks on everything. But I still keep a knife under the bed, just in case. I don't use Craigslist anymore. I don't even date much, because the scariest thing about what happened isn't what she did to me. It's how easily the world almost believed her, and how close I came to losing everything for a mistake I never even made. I sold a sports bag to a polite stranger named Emil for $100. 3 days later, police knocked on my door with his photo. He wasn't who he said he was, and that bag I sold him was his escape kit for over 13,000 hours of illegal content. I never really had much growing up. My parents were decent people, hardworking and supportive, but we weren't rolling in money. I grew up in a modest home in a quiet suburb outside of Jackson, Mississippi. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked reception at a dentist's office. I was their only child, and they did everything they could to push me toward a better future. By 2012, I had just finished college with a degree in computer science. After months of sending out resumes and interviewing at every company that would talk to me, I finally landed a job with a mid-sized software firm in a nearby city, Greenville. It wasn't Google or anything glamorous, but it was stable, had benefits, and it paid me enough to finally move out of my parents' place. I was 25 and beyond ready to have a space of my own. I ended up renting a small but decent 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood called Meadow Grove. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, quiet, and only 10 minutes from work. I remember feeling so proud when I signed the lease, like everything was finally starting to click into place. The move was exhausting. Boxes, furniture, cords, and cables from years of hoarding old tech. It all piled up quickly. And like anyone else moving into their first real place, I had to make some cuts. There was just no room for everything. That's how I ended up on Craigslist. Craigslist was still super popular back then. Everyone I knew had used it at least once to buy furniture, sell an old bike, find a roommate, so I figured why not. I posted a few items: a beat-up coffee table, some old video game controllers, and a large black sports tote I used back in high school when I played soccer. The tote was probably the most valuable thing on the list. It was still in great shape: waterproof, heavy-duty zippers, padded shoulder straps. I listed it for $30, hoping someone local would grab it. The next morning, I had a message. "Hi there, is the black equipment bag still available? I'd be happy to take it off your hands. Can pick up tonight? We'll pay more if needed." It was from a guy named Emil, no last name. His email had a bunch of numbers in it and didn't tell me much else. He said he lived close, just a few blocks over, and wanted to meet in the evening. Something about the message was polite and straightforward, which put me at ease. He offered $50 without hesitation. I messaged back, gave him my address, and told him to come by after 7 p.m. I probably should have been more cautious. I mean, meeting a stranger from the internet at your home. In hindsight, it was careless, but at the time, I told myself it was fine. I lived in a secure building, had neighbors across the hall, and a meal seemed normal enough. Besides, I didn't feel lugging the tote somewhere to meet up in public. My laziness outweighed my paranoia. That night, a knock came at the door around 7:45. I opened it to see a tall man, maybe mid to late 30s, standing there with a polite smile. He was thin, neatly dressed in a fitted gray sweater and jeans, and had this odd, almost formal presence. His hair was slicked back, and he had a faint accent. Swedish, maybe? "Hello," he said warmly, extending his arms. In my country, it's custom to greet with a hug. Before I could even process what he'd said, he leaned in and hugged me. It was awkward. 10 seconds, maybe more. I kinda just froze, unsure whether to pat his back or step away. I was gay and out, but this wasn't a date. It was a Craigslist sale. Still, he didn't seem threatening, just overly friendly. He let go, smiled again, and gestured toward the black tote sitting near my door. "Ah, perfect. This is it." "Yeah," I nodded. "Still in great shape. Zippers all work." He nodded in appreciation and pulled out his wallet. What he handed me wasn't $50. It was a crisp $100 bill. I hesitated. I don't have change." "Don't worry," he softly. "You were kind to let me come here. I pay for convenience." As he handed it to me, he made sure our hands touched for just a second too long. There was something deliberate about it, something I didn't like. He smiled again, took the bag, and turned toward the hallway. "Thank you again. I hope you have a very peaceful evening." I stood there, a moment longer than I probably should have, holding the $100 and feeling off. Nothing dramatic had happened, but something about him felt forced, like he was wearing a mask the whole time. But what could I do? He didn't threaten me. He paid me double. I chalked it up to cultural differences and tried to shake the weird feeling. Fast forward 2 days later. I had come down with a bad cold. Nothing serious, just body aches, chills, and a wicked sinus headache. I called in sick and spent most of the morning curled up in bed watching reruns of Parks and Rec. Around 2 p.m., I finally dozed off into a much-needed nap. I was jolted awake an hour later by someone banging on my door. Not knocking, banging. 3 hard, rapid pounds, followed by a pause, then 3 more. Groggy, I stumbled to the door in my sweatpants and opened it halfway. Standing there were 2 police officers and the building's property manager, Linda, a woman in her 50s with a salt and pepper ponytail and the patience of a kindergarten teacher. "Are you Nolan Hayes?" the older officer asked. Yeah. What's going on?" Linda stepped forward, phone in hand, and held it up to show me a blurry photo of a man. My stomach tightened immediately. It was Emil. That same gray sweater, same slicked back hair. "Do you know this man?" she asked. I nodded slowly, unsure of what I was stepping into. "Yeah, he bought a sports bag from me a couple nights ago, off Craigslist." The officers exchanged glances. "Did he enter your apartment?" "Only just inside the doorway. He didn't stay long." They asked me a series of questions. What exactly did I sell him? What did he say? Did he touch anything? Did he leave anything behind? When I asked what this was about, the younger officer shook his head. "We're not at liberty to say just yet. We just needed to confirm some details." And then they left. I barely slept that night. I replayed the interaction over and over again in my head. His hug, the money, the way he lingered, the weird way he said peaceful evening. Something wasn't right. I knew it in my bones. 3 days later, I got a call from a detective named Ramirez. She asked me to come down to the station for a formal interview. I went in the next morning. That's when I finally learned the truth. Emil, whose real name was Johan Eriksson, had been on the run for almost a year. He was wanted in 3 states for possession and distribution of child pornography. When they arrested him, he had 23 terabytes of content stored across multiple external hard drives and hidden SD cards. 23 terabytes! I couldn't even wrap my head around that number. The detective broke it down for me. That's over 13,000 hours of illegal footage, some of it allegedly self-produced. The tote I had sold him? They found it in the back seat of his car, zipped up with documents inside. Notes about encryption tools, online aliases, burner email accounts, instructions on how to wipe devices clean. He had even printed out legal loopholes and foreign extradition laws. That tote was basically his getaway kit. I felt sick, violated, disgusted. He had stood in my doorway, hugged me, touched my hand, and used my tote to further whatever twisted plans he had. The police ended up asking me to testify about the encounter, but in the end my statement was enough. They had already raided his storage unit, his car, and his burner apartment on the edge of town. I was just a small piece of the puzzle. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being close to something so horrifying. For days afterward, I kept wondering, what if he had asked to come inside? What if he hadn't been caught? I deleted my Craigslist account that week, stopped selling anything online, even threw out some furniture just to be sure he hadn't planted anything while I wasn't looking. I changed the locks, I bought a home security system, I stopped trusting people so easily. It's been years now, and I've moved twice since then. Life is good. I've got a partner, a dog, and a house with a backyard. But I'll never forget that feeling. That instinct I ignored because I didn't want to be rude, because I didn't want to believe something that dark could be hiding behind a smile and a polite accent. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: don't ever assume normal means safe. Even the most innocent Craigslist transaction can invite a nightmare through your front door.